Hey Pam, so here's a simple idea for you. You had asked for thoughts on how to make it look like a clip art character is shivering. And on this slide, I've got a very nervous looking character. She's separate from her background. You'll notice if I move her around, the background stays put. So if your character has a background or if it's grouped with other things, that might have come along with it, you'll want to separate the character from the background so that, you can animate the character all by itself. What we're going to do is apply a motion path animation and then shrink it down real small so that the movement is kind of subtle. And to do that, we've got our character selected and we're going to come up here to the Animations tab in PowerPoint. We're going to click this little arrow right here to get the drop down, and right down here at the bottom we've got this option called Custom Path, and that's the one we want to choose. When you do that, you'll see that your cursor changes to this little crosshair icon, and then you can draw the path that you want the animation to take. So I'm going to click right in the middle of my clip art character here, and I'm going to hold my mouse button down and just do kind of this scribble motion here, kind of just go up and down several times. It doesn't have to be precise at all because this is going to be kind of a subtle movement when we're all done. I'm going to release right there about in the middle. And you can see initially the movement is going to look very dramatic as you just saw, but what we can do is zoom way in to get a real close look at that path, and we can resize it. So I'm going to hold on my control key here and scroll my mouse wheel forward so that we can get a nice tight view of that motion path. And from here we can select the motion path. It's already selected now, and I'm going to just grab the corner here and resize it down to be about as small as PowerPoint lets us make it. You can see how tiny it gets. So I'm just kind of resizing this the same way that I would resize a shape or an object. The only difference here is that we're resizing the motion path instead, and then we'll scroll back out. So I'm going to hold down my control key and scroll my mouse wheel toward me to come back out to a wider view. Now once you've got your animation in place like this, you can sync your animation with your audio if you want, because over here you can see how it defaults to being an on-click animation. So that means you can use Presenter's Sync Animations tool if you want. Or if you'd rather have the animation start right when the slide starts, you can come up here to this Start item right here and change this to With Previous, and that way the animation is going to begin as soon as the learner arrives at the slide. Another thing that you might want to consider is stretching the length of the animation out a little bit. You can see it defaults to a couple of seconds here, but if you want it to last a little longer, you can stretch this out a little bit. And you can play with what kind of time frame looks good for your situation. I made mine, I think, about almost 5 seconds here. So now if we come up to the Articulate tab, we can preview this. We'll preview this slide and see what this would look like once it's published. So there's our character, and you can see how she's kind of quaking or shivering. So I hope that that gives you maybe some ideas that you can run with. I'll go ahead and attach this file to the forum conversation, and looking forward to hearing what you do with this. Sometimes it's kind of fun to create sort of a pan and zoom effect where you move across an image and then zoom to feature one particular part of that image. So here's an example where we're panning across a group of people, and then at the end we can zoom on this one particular guy to get a little bit more information. This can be a nice technique if you're presenting maybe an e-learning scenario where you're showing how a particular person might respond to a challenge or a question. Here's another example. In this one, I've got a row of frogs and other little creatures. And if we pan across the group of them, then when we get to the end where the snake appears, we can zoom and hear a little bit more about him. So let's see how we build something like this. What you can do is create your own panoramic image by piecing together several individual images. So in this example, I just used several images of people, and most of these images I got free from elearningart.com as a free download. And then I just selected them all and grouped them as one image. And this back part here, this background, is just a blue rectangle that I created with PowerPoint shapes, and then I drew this brown rectangle over top of that. What we're going to do here is build 2 slides, one for the pan and one for the zoom. And we need to kind of start with the end in mind. So I'm going to select my panoramic image and position it at the place where I want the panning motion to stop. So in other words, I'm going to feature this guy right here, so I want him to be right in the middle of my slide. And then I'm going to add a duplicate of this slide. So we'll come over here and right-click on the thumbnail and choose Duplicate Slide. And the first slide here is where we're going to apply the motion. This is a little bit tricky. Even though my ultimate plan is to have the image move to the right, what we're going to do is apply a motion path to the left and then reverse the path direction. And what that does is it makes sure that the stopping point of this image is exactly lined up with the duplicate image on my next slide, because we want it to look real fluid, right? Like it's actually one slide. We don't even want a 1 pixel jump. So with my panoramic image selected, I'm going to come over to my custom animation window, choose Add Effect, Motion Paths, and then choose Left. And now we need to do a little bit of fine tuning. First thing is I'm going to right click on the path and choose Reverse Path Direction. And I'm also going to change the start of this animation to with previous so that it's going to begin as soon as the slide appears. Another thing that we want to do is make this motion path quite a bit longer. It's pretty short right here. In fact, we're going to extend this green arrow. I'm going to hold on my Shift key and just stretch this green arrow all the way off the left edge of my slide. And this way it's going to cause that image to start way over here at the left so that we see the entire line of people as they move across the slide to the right. And this is something that you'll need to play with a little bit as far as the length of your motion path, depending on the size of the image that you're using. The other thing that you'll want to adjust is the timing. So let's come back over here, select the motion path, and then choose timing. And I'm going to set this one at about 6 seconds. That feels about right to me because I might want to, fit in a little bit of narration or something while we're panning across these people. So let's look at this preview. This looks pretty good, and it looks like we're stopping in about the right place, so that looks good. Now let's think about how we can zoom in on this last character here, this guy. What I've already done here is on slide 3 I created a larger version of that same image. I just copied the same graphic and then I sized it up quite a bit to take up most of the slide. And then I used PowerPoint's cropping tool, which you can get to from the Format tab and then choose Crop, just to get rid of the part of the image that I didn't need. And I grouped that image with the same blue rectangle that I used for the background of the previous slides. Now that I've made my zoom, I'm just going to go ahead and right click and cut from this slide, move to slide 2, and then I'm going to paste it right over the images on slide 2. And now we just need to add that zoom animation. So with that image selected, I'm going to choose Add Effect, Entrance, and then choose Faded Zoom. And once again, I'm going to choose the start to be with previous so that it happens as soon as the slide appears. And then from here, if you wanted to, you could add, a thought bubble over here or a call out like I did in the example that we saw earlier. And now we can also get rid of this third slide here. We can just delete that because that was really just a working area. It wasn't part of my presentation. Okay, so just to show you another look at how this appears when you publish from Presenter, here's how that panning motion is going to look, and then at the end of the pan, then we can zoom in to feature this one particular character that appears at the end. So I hope that maybe gives you some new ideas for ways you can liven up your scenarios with motion paths and zooming.
Hi everybody, Nicole here. I recently shared this interactive timeline that I created using PowerPoint with the Articulate community, and I thought I would record a short screencast to show you all how I pulled it together. As you can see, when I hover over the different areas of the timeline, information and images become visible. This is all made possible using PowerPoint's actions. So let me show you how I did this. So here I am on a blank slide in a new PowerPoint project. The first thing I'm going to do is click on the View tab and open the Slide Master. Here, I'm going to delete the placeholder items on this master slide, and instead I'll add a staggered row of colorful rectangles, which represent the items on my timeline. I'm also adding in a gray header rectangle with the title and some simple instructions. The reason I'm putting these on the Slide Master is to save time and make it easier to recolor my timeline down the road if need be. When I'm done adding these items, I exit the Slide Master. Now, the functionality that I want to achieve is that when they hover over each column in the timeline, it shows them specific information associated with that column. So to do that, I'm going to create one new slide for each item in the timeline. So to do this, I'm going to duplicate this first slide. And now when I hover over a timeline item, I want my other items to be blurred out. So I will add a semi-transparent rectangle over top of this entire slide, which will act as my blur. And then I will also assign an action to this rectangle. The action hyperlinks to slide 1 when the user mouses over the background rectangle. Now, with the background blur in place, you can duplicate this slide 5 more times. So in the end, you have a total of 7 slides, your main slide, and then 6 slides with the blurred white background. The next thing we'll do is set up the items on our timeline. We're going to go back to the slide master and grab all of these shapes and copy them. This is done so that we can save time using the copy and paste feature. We'll close out of the slide master and we will paste these objects onto slide 1. Next, we'll add a semi-transparent rectangle across the center of our timeline. For each column, we will copy and paste the corresponding colored rectangle and the white semi-transparent rectangle and paste them onto the corresponding layer. We will do this for each column in the timeline. When we've done this for each slide, we can delete the shapes that we've pasted onto slide 1 since we no longer need them. My next step is to add a text box over each column in the timeline. For this example, I'm using years as my markers on my timeline. So I create my first text box and I size it appropriately. And then I use copy and paste to duplicate it across the rest of my columns. When all of my text boxes are in place, I assign an action to each one. The action will hyperlink to the corresponding slide when the mouse hovers over the text box. I do this for each text box, one at a time. My next step is to copy and paste all of the text boxes onto every slide. Finally, I need to style each individual slide. So to do this, I'll do a couple of things, including adding some additional information or text, and you might also want to add in some photos or characters, like in the example that I posted in the community. In this example, I'm also deleting the text in all the other text boxes so that they are less visible and it's the column that you're hovering over that really stands out. I am leaving the text boxes there and not deleting them because I want the actions associated with them to still be functional. I do this for each slide. When you've updated all 6 slides, you can head on over to the Articulate tab on the ribbon to preview your interactive timeline. And voila! As you can see, when you hover over the columns, the appropriate slides with the information are displayed. So this shows you how using the appropriate actions, you can use PowerPoint to create something fun and interactive. Thanks for watching!